I've seen people who have harmed themselves, done self-harm, because they were unable to separate themselves from their business. They were too aligned to their business. They were too married to their business. It was their baby, and it meant everything to them. No, you are separate to your business.
Hi there, you're very welcome back to All in Business, your weekly business show here on JOE, backed by AIB. Well, we're all still on lockdown, obviously, and what better time to consider upskilling? Whether you're a business thinking maybe this is the right time to pivot, or an employee looking to future-proof yourself for when things go back to normal, we'll be talking about the best way to take a creative approach to your career during COVID. And to do that, we're joined by Jane Downs, author of the Career Book and founder of Clearview Coaching Group, and Morgan Cummins, director at TalentHub. Then later on, we'll speak to Pádraig Ó Céidigh, founder of Arann Express and Lingus Regional, who's been through his fair share of business crises over the years. He's also been nominated for World Entrepreneur of the Year twice, so he knows what he's talking about. Stay with us for his insight. Before all that, though, don't forget to hit subscribe to get the full show each week on podcast and on YouTube so that you never miss an episode.
JOE presents All In, together with AIB, backing Irish business.
Jane and Morgan, thank you so much for being with us this morning. I want to start by asking you both, for anyone considering a move or considering trying to upskill at the moment, what's the best place to start and what should they be considering?
Morgan, do you want to go first there?
Yes, I will. And good morning, Yvonne. Good morning, Jane.
Good morning.
Great to talk to you, and what a beautiful morning to be recording as well. For me, the first place to start is actually with your own attitude. The one thing that we can control at the moment through this very unprecedented time is simply our attitude. And what I would see a lot when people come to me, even before something like this happens, is that if they don't have the right attitude to looking for that next job, it's going to prove much harder. So for me, the first thing to do is think about your attitude. And then from there, and later today, I'd love to get into building out how you can put just simply 1 to 2 hours a day, every day towards finding that job. And I'll show you a strategy and how you can build a strategy around that.
What about yourself, Jane?
Yes, I think, look, now is the time to reflect. And I think what we do need to do, we know this coronavirus is a horror and lives are being threatened and lives are being lost every day. And I don't for 1 minute want to underplay that. But I do see this as an opportunity, almost like a hiatus, to take a little bit of time out to reflect, first of all, on your career, what it's about for you now, right now, what you want it to be, but also to boost your skills. And there's a huge array of online platforms and learning platforms offering free courses. And for those of you at home who may also have children, I'm very aware of that. This does not mean you're signing up for an MBA or anything like that. There is short, concise courses that can build out your skills range for when the rebound happens. So it'll help build your CV, build your credibility, and more than anything, build your confidence and your skills transfer.
And Jane, are there any online resources in particular that you would recommend?
Yes, I recommend a suite of online resources, and I particularly like the free courses too, because clearly at a time like this, people want to conserve any sort of financial pot they may have, if they have one, of course. Look, we have Coursera, we have Udemy, we have Allison, which is a learning platform with free resources there in terms of learning. But again, we do need to figure out what we're trying to upskill in. So there's larger pieces around a particular industry or our knowledge that we need to upskill in. And then there's courses that are called plug-in courses that allow us a toolkit to be even better at what we do, whether that's project management or digital marketing or advanced Excel, or leadership development, management development is very much on the agenda right now for everybody because there's such change happening. We need to be agile as leaders and managers.
And Morgan, I wanted to ask you, in terms of the different types of upskilling people might want to do, people might be torn between, finding their way around the crypto space, learning a new language, or just improving existing skills that they already have. How can they figure out what's the best move for them and what's the best use of their time right now?
Yeah, well, this actually reminds me of where I was in my own career 5 years ago. I got very disillusioned with advertising, which I'd worked in for 18 years. So the first thing I did was identify the top 3 skills that I had and see then what those skills were in terms of one of them was dealing with people and where I could utilize that elsewhere. I think something as Jane said, you don't have to start looking at doing a whole MBA now. If anything, I would recommend the opposite and even concentrating on what we call is developing a kind of keystone skill that you can then take further. Another thing which I think is really wise thing to do is within your own industry, look and see where there is a real pain point, a problem that's happening right now, and learn about that. And again, I suppose bringing it back to, and I suppose the big caveat with all of this is that what we're both recommending here is it could be a big change in habit for you as well. And as it's been proven, habits don't form over 3 weeks, as modern literature says. It's actually 66 days. So I think you need to be actually compassionate to yourself as well, and maybe start with even 30 minutes a day, but then build that up and maybe just commit to that a couple of times a week firstly. But I think actually for me, it's definitely starting and looking at your own core skill set. And you can just ask your partner, you can ask your colleagues now. The one thing we all have now is a lot more time. But I think focus on working on what you have and then developing that so you're a better version of yourself in 2 to 3 months' time.
Okay, good advice there. Jane, I wanted to come back to you for a second and ask you, some people are facing particularly hard times right now, maybe pay cuts, maybe redundancy, or maybe the closure of the business altogether. I know a lot of people might be taking this personally at the moment, even though it's quite literally out of their hands. How do you think people can step back and stop internalizing this?
Yes, and this is about also what Morgan said earlier about, managing your attitude to this. Look, these are unprecedented times. We know this. We're hearing this every hour of the day in the news. Please, 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 for anybody listening or watching today, this is not something to be taken personally. This is just a sign of the times right now. And as opposed to putting all this energy into your emotion around taking it personally, I would much, much rather that you put this time and energy into looking at what you're in control of here now, which is upskilling, which is figuring out, what you can do here to move your career on for when the rebound happens, and looking at that skills transfer, because you are your skills at the end of the day. Obviously, personality hugely comes into it too, but we need to be good to ourselves. Morgan is completely right. We need to be good to ourselves, but we also need to try not to use this downtime to move into this sort of negative self-pity place, as easy as it is to go there. And I saw this and worked very hard on this area in the recessionary times in the past. And it was the people who used their career as a project and saw it as a project and adapted and responded to market conditions who were the ones who actually moved forward and had success. And I do believe the same applies here again.
And some good tips there in terms of self-care. Just a question for both of you. Other than upskilling, other than maybe considering a pivot generally, what are some other things people can do right now to self-care, business-wise and career-wise?
I think we've never had so much time now to actually invest in what's most important. If like me, I have 3 kids, so it's being really mindful and being really present with your kids. I know I was guilty of that 4 weeks ago when we first moved into this lockdown mode, where I kind of squirreled myself away up in my son's bedroom, where I'm sitting now again this morning. And I was very kind of strict. I actually became too strict on myself in terms of trying to get everything done. So I was lucky. I have a habit of mindfulness practice for the last 5 years, but it's allowed me now to spend proper time on things like mindfulness. I've always wanted to learn yoga. So again, it's something, but I think the important thing with an activity like yoga are exercises. I now do that with my wife. And actually, it's those little micro moments at 3 times a week when we do it has become something we both look forward to. And again, to Jane's point, absolutely, you should take this as an opportunity to make it your own personal project of finding a job. But at the same time, you've got to be kind to yourself, and you've got to give those moments of going for walks together are simply one of the best pieces of advice I was given, is get loads of vitamin nature and get out for some walks.
That's not banned yet. We're allowed to walk, which is a great thing. So
Yes.
clearly air is vital. I think anything you can do to benefit for those who maybe have been commuting to their work, they've gained back 2 hours a day. I see it from my own husband. And if we can use that time to benefit ourselves in the form of air or yoga or mindfulness or good old Joe Wicks in the UK, which my children are making me do every morning before I start my day's work, these are things that are feeding us and fueling us. From a career perspective, in my opinion, when we start to reflect and take action, because without action, dissatisfaction stays put. So if we can reflect and act, and I suppose get inspired and informed by looking at organizations and industries that are excite us, products or service that we might want to be part of in terms of our work. What I would say is, from a career perspective, we need to get inspired and get informed, because this gives us a sense of well-being when we're researching and exploring our next step career options. And also for those at home who are on 3-day weeks or just wanting a change and their mindset has changed because of what's happened here in the world. It's allocating time to getting inspired, because through getting inspired, then we get informed, and then we can move when the time comes to allow us to move.
And a lot of people maybe who've been through this already, so sort of with the '08 recession.
Yes.
Do either of you have any maybe uplifting, positive success stories of people who pivoted or took the time to upskill then, and what came of it?
If I may, my own personal story, which I alluded to earlier, Yvonne, is probably the best one I can tell, because I was faced with a situation 5 years ago where literally I was dreading going into work every day, and lots of factors, and I think that recession was a big thing. But our industry in advertising had lost half its value in terms of its hourly rates. The pressures we were under to deliver were the same, but we had to do it for half the cost, basically. I seriously thought at that time maybe I was better off just giving up advertising and just taking any job. But then sort of the light bulb moment was when actually my kids were waking me up so early on Saturday mornings that I then started to watch some great thought leaders around finding purpose in work, the likes of Simon Sinek, and really sort of built on that on a sort of daily basis of trying to find where I could add value elsewhere. As I said earlier, when I realized that I 3 core skills of being good with people, listening, and making things happen. And something Jane alluded to earlier there was basically finding industries that those skills could be used really well. And that led me into recruitment 5 years ago. And 2 weeks just before the virus hit, I set up a second business, which is in the executive coaching space. If you had said that to me 5 years ago, that I was going to be working in a job that I absolutely love, I would have actually thought you were crazy.
Mm-hmm. Great personal. I love success stories generally, but the more personal ones are the better. So we couldn't have asked for a better example, Morgan. Thank you. What about you, Jane? I'm sure you've come across a lot of similar stories.
Absolutely. And at Clearview Coaching Group, we were very much involved over the years in sort of boutique outplacement support for organizations who are making redundancies. We've seen huge change in people. We've seen people move from banking into multinationals. We've seen people move from being marketeers into yoga teachers. We've seen it all. I've had the joy of seeing that. But the most important point in all of this is that there is a common denominator when it comes to the person who can make that successful change. And that is about mindset and showing up to make this happen and allocating time to it. So that is what's key here. Managing your mindset, celebrating successes along the way where you can, keeping sane, looking after yourself, but doing the nitty-gritty application of this, which is job research, market research, industry research, rolling in research, and upskilling. Otherwise, none of this will happen, as I'm sure Morgan would agree with me on.
And what about people who may be watching or listening to this thinking, this is a lovely idea, but I personally don't have time for upskilling. I'm too busy making really tough choices, like,
I hear
winding down
you.
a business or letting people go.
I hear you.
How would you recommend they focus on themselves as well as getting through that?
Yes, and it may also sound a bit nauseating for them to be listening to this, and they may say that, look, we're deluded. This is a luxury that this person cannot afford right now. But actually, more than now than ever, I would argue that this is the time that that person needs to allocate some time to this, whatever time they have available to them, and to make the sacrifice, because sacrifice is a dirty word. I've talked about this for a long time, but we need to make sacrifice at times, and certainly at a time like this, because at the end of the day, we want people to move forward in as best they can with the situation we have.
And just to come in on that, Yvonne,
Sure.
there was a great saying, it's quite a common saying, but there's very few people beyond the extra mile. When someone gives you that service and they went over and above and they went beyond the extra mile to deliver that, it's going back to exactly what Jane said around mindset and attitude. At the moment, that's the one decision you can decide to do. You can either watch lots of Netflix, or decide to say, I'm going to put aside just an hour a day to looking for a job. So if you roll that forward to 3 to 6 months time, and I'm interviewing you, and I ask you, so what did you spend your time with? And I get a blank silence, and you clearly know that they didn't invest in themselves, versus someone that might come back and say, well, I actually taught myself to code with my kids. Or, there was this public speaking Toastmasters that I was always really curious about, and they took it online straight away. And this is going to be the massive shift that we're going to see in hiring, because in our business, we're still hiring at the moment for certain industries and certain clients. But what people are going to start really hiring for is things like values, is things like attitude, and then it'll be skills and abilities. So I know it's really tough time, and we're all going through this together. But the one thing you can make a decision on is if you're going to invest even an hour a day in yourself.
Morgan, do you think that will become part of the lexicon in things like hiring and job interviews, etc.? Are we likely to be facing what did you do during COVID as a legitimate question for the foreseeable future?
Absolutely. I mean, we've never, ever been given the one commodity we were also scarce with, which was our time. And if you think about that, this means that there's so many people around you who are also time rich, who you could be going to ask to be your mentor or you're an accountability partner. So again, if you bring that forward, when we will get through this. So when we are through this, you'll be able to talk to those things that you did and include them on your CV. Just an industry example I have of one of the largest retailers. I'm lucky enough to work with their ingoing global CEO. And I asked him about a year ago why he took that job. He was leaving the pharmaceutical industry to go into what I thought was really, really difficult retail business. And he said, because the leadership team and the board in there were really, really caring about the values of the company and their behaviors. That retailer 3 weeks ago was the first retailer to give all their staff a 10% increase in terms of bonus for the work that they're doing. So if you play that through going forward over the next 3 to 6 months, and how we're also having our own resets right now as well, I really do see changes in hiring decisions coming down the track, both based from the employer side and the employee side on how people behave during this crisis.
And I think more now than ever, we're going to see a need for agility, individuals being able to be agile, to be able to adapt and respond as this emerges and continues. This is not going to change overnight. We're certainly not going to be back to our normal times overnight. So from an interviewing perspective, if you can show that you are agile enough to take ownership and be self-directed and manage your own career as your career manager, to take on programs and courses to self-develop yourself, that shows that you can be agile and adapt. So there's a behavior there that we're seeing, and we can talk through that at interview and ask you questions around that, and you can display that. So it's a win-win. You're building skills and confidence, but you're also showing that you can adapt and respond.
Well, let's explore that, Jane. Upskilling interpersonal skills, I suppose,
Yes.
for managers. What about things like remote influencing and changing their management style over the next while.
Absolutely. So remote leadership is hugely being called into play now. We've just launched a remote leadership program for individual managers to gain a toolkit, I suppose, to assist them on the job, because this has been forced among people. So I'm sure managers and leaders are finding resistance to remote working, and some are loving it. You know, if there's very tight, you know, I suppose, in-office cultures that existed in organizations, and suddenly they find themselves in a situation where people are working remotely, it is the job of the leader to manage that. We're also managing powerful emotions at the moment and worries. So it's trying to find tools to allow you to check in regularly with your team, to not move into this role of controller leader, I suppose, as I call it, or therapist leader. We have to be careful, because then a dependency is set up. What we want is to be a leader who nurtures people remotely, coaches them, asks appropriate questions, runs really effective virtual meetings by ensuring that actions are met and people are listened to. That allows for one-to-one check-in time too, to check that somebody's doing okay, because we all have things going on at home at the moment. We cannot take for granted that somebody may not have a relation who's ill in hospital right now. So there's so many parameters to this, but as a leader, it is up to you to get comfortable and as quick as possible with this move to remote leadership. So any tools you can gain to allow you be effective in that space is only but going to help you. And I would believe that deploying a coaching style can really help with your ability to coach remotely and to develop people and engage for performance.
Okay, and I'll throw to you on that now, Morgan. You know, you've got you're a director at one business and you've just started another. So you must be under pressure management wise and leadership wise yourself right now.
No, absolutely. And to Jane's point, the critical thing now is leaders have to show empathy. And you have to start, as a good leader, you actually have to start with yourself. And back to what I was saying initially, how I was just in complete delivery mode, and when you can step out of that, your empathy has to go to your team. And then I would bring that back to really sharpening your curiosity and your listening skills, because we're now communicating virtually over glass. We don't have the sensories, that the body language, the little sort of nuggets of wisdom that we get from really good deep listening when we're in a room with someone. So for me, it's actually, and the best thing is all of these skills can be developed. We're not born with no empathy. We're not born with no listening skills. But now we have to put the time into that. One of the quick things, there's 11 of us in our business. One of the immediate things we did as a leadership team was set up daily calls as a leadership team, and then followed by our check-in calls. We do 2 weekly calls with their team. I'm actually had to move to today's call to later this morning to do that, and then follow that up individually. There's 3 of us that sit on the leadership team that are in the business. And again, we all had different people reporting into us, but the most important thing was to have daily check-ins, not just through Slack and channels like that, true face-to-face communication like this. And because it's only then that you'll understand what other people are going through. And I suppose the really exciting and rewarding part was we've now seen where natural leaders on our team have just shown up. They've literally shown up, and I think it's then having the ability to nurture that. And it goes back to our point on what you as a candidate are going to do through this. It's the behaviors that will come, that if they do bubble up, they will get noticed when you're interviewing in maybe 3 months' time.
I think that's a nice place to leave it. Sometimes you don't need to upskill. Sometimes the skills show up. Yes. Jane and Morgan, thank you so much for being with us. Lots of valuable tips there. And listen, stay safe during COVID, and we'll all come out the other side and talk to you then.
We will too.
Thanks,
Thank you
Yvonne.
so much.
My next guest knows all about the highs and lows of business, and not just because he runs airlines. Pádraig Ó Céidigh has weathered his fair share of storms over the years and joins us now to talk about resilience and better days ahead. So Pádraig, you have seen your fair share of business crises over the years, and we'd love to get your insight into this particular crisis, the COVID crisis, and what you think the biggest challenge is for Irish businesses at the moment.
Well, there are a number of challenges, Yvonne. The main one is, as people talk about, is liquidity. In other words, having enough cash to keep going and to see out this enormous storm, so that companies can survive. If they can survive, particularly SMEs, small and medium-sized businesses, if they can survive, then they have a chance of growing. But if they cannot survive through this tsunami that's happening all over the world, well, then they're gone, and it's extremely difficult for them to come back.
And in terms of your own business history, Pádraig, I mean, you've weathered out the storm of 9/11, the Icelandic volcanic ash crisis, the 2008 recession, and the first two there in particular. I mean, for a person in the airline industry, those two were very specific, particular disasters for you and for the industry. I'd imagine you've learned a thing or two about resilience yourself over the years going through those crises.
Yeah, I suppose I have, Yvonne. The bottom line, probably the most important thing about resilience, is never give up. Just keep going, keep going, keep going. You may be on your last breath, but keep breathing and keep pushing. And that's where liquidity is really important. And it's extremely important, from my experience, that you actually put together an emergency plan. Now, I'll be honest with you, pretty quickly, within a couple of weeks, you need to put together another emergency plan, but you just keep going. The other thing is to have really good people around you. And people often say it's only in an emergency to really know who your real friends are, you know. And for me, there are some industries, Yvonne, that are a lot more damaged as a result of a recession than others. Unfortunately, usually aviation is in the front line of that in all recessions. You have people not doing as much traveling, and your fares plummet. So it's normally one of the first industries that gets hit and that gets damaged. Sorry, Yvonne.
No, I was just going to say, I suppose, that's a good point that you make. I suppose the thing about the COVID crisis is that there are now so many industries on the front line and all at once, and so unexpectedly. I'm wondering what your advice would be for maybe someone who is struggling at the moment, is determined to keep going and keep breathing, as you say, but maybe is floundering just at the unexpected nature of all this, and would quite happily put in the work to put together an emergency plan, but doesn't really know where to start.
Okay. The bottom line in the emergency plan is actually cash flow. To have enough liquidity and enough cash flow just to keep going. Now, if it means you got to close the doors of your business, but to have a cash flow balance in your bank so that you've got that money to kickstart you again when all of this is over. Because one thing is certain, as night follows day, this is going to go. This is going to clear up. We're going to get a vaccine. We're going to clear up, and we're going to move on from there. So you just do your best to be in position to actually kickstart your business again. So what that means, thankfully, the government have introduced emergency measures to support employees. I know an awful lot of SMEs are doing everything they can to support their employees, and that's really laudable of them. So that's one thing. The next thing they got to do then is saying, okay, we cannot take any orders, we're getting no income, so we cannot have any expenditure. And we just lock down, put our business to sleep, as it were, as just coined a phrase from the Taoiseach Leo Varadkar, and cut out all expenditure you can. Like, I would be asking for Air and all of the other national providers to say, okay, we're going to put a stay on business bills at the moment. We're not going to charge you for water, any of those expenses at the moment, because we know what it's like, and we want you people, you women and you men, to kickstart your business again, but you need to have the cash to do that.
And going into examinership, Pádraig, there'd be logistical and practical worries in taking that step, but there'd also, I'd imagine, be a huge amount of stress involved in that.
Yeah, we went into examinership back in 2010, and basically, for me, what examinership meant was we had a really good business, we had amazing staff, but because of a number of factors, the recession and the volcanic ash in Iceland, as you mentioned earlier, Yvonne, those threw our business model totally out of kilter. And we were not able to continue to pay some of the creditors in the same fashion. And also, I must say, some of the creditors did not give us any latitude, did not cut any slack for us. So we had no option but to put the company into examinership. Basically, the judge looks at the business and decides that, yeah, this is a good business, but for this factor that happened that's outside of the control of the business, it's not able to meet all its debts now. So it actually gives you breathing space to actually move on and survive. And I am sure that quite a number of SMEs, small and medium-sized businesses, will consider examinership over the coming weeks and months. And yeah, it's definitely an option. Don't fear it. Don't fear it. If you need to keep that business going, you may end up not owning the business or owning a smaller part of it, but at least your business has a good chance of survival.
And when you look back at those times that you've been through yourself, 9/11 and the Icelandic volcanic ash crisis, Pádraig, what stands out to you in terms of memories or milestones from the time, and how did you get through it?
Yeah, there are two parts to it, Yvonne. The main part, quite frankly, was a personal part. I felt there for a while that, look, I'm a failure. We're not going to get through this. What did I do wrong? And I started blaming myself. And I started to some degree feeling sorry for myself, to some degree. And then I quickly decided, hold on a minute, Pádraig, you've got two choices here. You can stay in the gutter and start feeling sorry for yourself, or you can pick yourself up and say, okay, what am I made of now? This is a new challenge and a different challenge for me. So which one of those two kind of people are you? And I decided I'm the second one. And I decided I'm going to continue to give it the best shot I can in every way I can. And that's the biggest part of it, Yvonne, I think, going through a recession and going through a situation like this for everybody. The second part is got to do with the business and the people around you. And people often say, and it's so true, you have a small number of really good friends. Normally you can count them just with 5 fingers on one hand. And that's your secure base, or that's your safe harbor. So when everything else is going in the wrong direction, you have 1 or 2 or 3 of those people who kind of pull you back up and say, hold on a second, and show you the big picture, because you're swamped into it. And those people are critically, critically important. So, Yvonne, it's all about people, it's about yourself, and it's about that secure base that's around you to help you get through times like this. Also, Yvonne, I'll be honest with you, I thought I used to mentor some international rugby players and Olympic athletes just on a voluntary basis. So proud of what those people do in sport. And I thought to myself, those people lose more games than what they win. And yet they pick themselves up and they move on. And every game is a different game. Every day has a new dawn. So you'd say, what can I do today? What one little thing can I do today that's going to actually make it better than what it was yesterday?
Yeah, good. Some good and very positive advice there, Pádraig, and I'm sure a lot of people watching and listening will be quite happy to hear kind of such a positive message from someone like yourself. We had another proud Galwegian on last week, another Spittle man, Pádraig Ó Céidigh, who he's turned his distillery into an alcohol hand sanitizer manufacturing company, pivoting in times like this to make a difference and to keep himself afloat as well, of course. And I was impressed by his ingenuity and I suppose his creativity in thinking outside the box, thinking of new ways of doing things. I'm wondering what you think about different ways to think outside the box and different ways of coming up with creative solutions for people to keep themselves going in these times.
Yeah, innovation is absolutely critical. And if I may, I'll just talk about business for a minute, Yvonne. I'll give you 2 examples just from my own experience. One is my eldest daughter was doing the leave insert, and they used to connect an awful lot at that time by text messages, and we had an issue in Arann at the time because we had difficulty connecting with passengers, particularly if they're delayed flights and that. So I was talking to Emer one day and about our text messaging, and actually what we did is we introduced that into the airline. So we got now it's kind of old technology now, but we used to get everybody who flew with us to give us their email, their mobile number. So if there's a delay, we text them automatically. So it's the reason I'm saying that is you're picking an idea that happens in a totally different industry, in a totally different sphere, and you say, can I or how can I use that here? The second thing you do is you'd say, like, now look at entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs they're innovative people. So the most successful entrepreneurs I have come across, what they look at is they'll say, where is the problem? Where is the greatest problem here? And what resources do I have to actually solve that problem? So they use your term, they pivot, they use existing resources to actually create something different that solves a problem here and now. And it could be any kind of a problem. A number of years ago, you might remember, we ran out of road salt one winter, and we had ice all over the place. People couldn't move. And I knew a trader in Miami, actually, and I contacted him and I said, can you get me the road salt? Can I get it in this country? So I imported something like 20,000 ton of road salt, and I passed it on to the government and the NRA. And that's what you use. Use whatever context, resources you have to try and solve a different problem. Like Mr. Grealish from Unspidgel, and fantastic. He's got a great product, Yvonne. I hope he goes back to it. It's called Puchine, and I wish him every success with it. But it's basically that. It's actually looking at the problem and saying, what resources can I get, do I have that's going to help solve it?
And we're almost out of time, Pádraig. Unfortunately, the time just goes so fast with these conversations. But I wanted to ask you one final question before we go. The theme of this episode is upskilling. Now that we all have time, and probably a little bit more time than we would like to have right now, and I'm wondering about your advice on that for anyone who has that kind of time, unfortunately, at the moment, and is thinking maybe they want to future-proof their business, or maybe they just want to future-proof and improve themselves with this time.
Yeah. Continuous learning is critical at all times, particularly now if you've got a bit of downtime. And we've got the facility now where we've got the internet. Most people have got broadband and so on. So you don't have to go to a shop to buy a book or to do a course. There's so many fantastic courses online. I came across one there recently. It's Masterclass. It's an American organization. You've got a great entrepreneur in Trillian Kerry, Jim Breen, who's got a company called Pulse Learning, and Jim has actually turned the learning around there. So actually you can now link in to Jim's website, pulselearning, I think, .com, whereby you can get mental health classes, for example. And as far as I know, they're free of charge at the moment during this COVID-19 pandemic. So there's lots of things one can do. So if you're leading your business, if you're working in a business, say to yourself, how can I maximize my time during this downtime, as it were, in order to grow and develop myself as a person, both professionally and personally? And you'll be the better of it.
And you mentioned mental health there and Jim Breen, Pádraig. This really is the final question. I know I said the last one was. I'm curious about your advice on separating oneself from their business at this time, because I mean, some businesses won't be around in 12 months, and you used the word failure there earlier to say that you felt you were a failure at that time. I'd imagine a lot of people will be feeling like that. How do you separate yourself and your self-worth from the business so that if one goes under, the other doesn't follow? Yeah,
it's like two circles. Going back to the days when people are doing junior cert or even cert maths, and the two circles interact, but they're separate also. There's a separate part. So you have one circle and another circle. And one of those circles is you and the other one is the business, and the overlap is between you and the business. But you are not your business. You are a separate entity to your business. First question I would suggest people ask, what is the purpose of your business? What is your purpose as an individual? And purpose changes. And there's much more purpose to your life than there is purely to a business, because you can start another business. You can start another business if you want to. So you actually start clearing up that distinction. And you, unfortunately, Yvonne, I've seen people who have harmed themselves, done self-harm, because they were unable to separate themselves from their business. They were too aligned to their business. They were too married to their business. It was their baby, and it meant everything to them. No, you are separate to your business. That's probably the single most important, I suppose, point I would love people to take away with them from listening to this conversation today, that you are separate to your business. Clearly set out your own purpose and the purpose of the business.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Pádraig. Really timely and so relevant right now, that advice at the moment. And thank you for being with us this morning. And look, good luck weathering the storm up there in Connemara while the rest of us weather it all over the country. And as you say, we're all going to get through it. It's just a matter of waiting it out.
We will, Yvonne, and Goramila Mahagat, Slán go fóill.
And if you'd like to hear more from Pádraig, he's partnered with ISME and Griffith College to offer free online training courses for businesses during the COVID crisis. Now that's it from us for this week. Thanks for being with us, and thanks to AIB, of course, for backing the programme. Don't forget to hit subscribe so that you never miss an episode, and we'll be back here next week, same time, same place. See you then.